Welcome to Joy in the Breakthrough, a podcast where we'll be talking to a wide range of leaders from different generations and backgrounds who have found power in being broken open. I'm Connie Lindsey.
And I'm Anna Valencia. We are your hosts, and we believe that our challenges can lead to breakthroughs, and we want to share those insights with you.
We hope these stories will inspire you to explore the I'm possible in you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again with Joy in the Breakthrough. Today, we're going to just have Connie and Anna time.
Exactly.
We're going to have our little tea here, and we're just going to spill the tea. And one of the things that has come up when we talked to Dr. Raby, who I hope you have all listened to because she's extraordinary.
Absolutely.
And Connie and I got to talking about something she said in our pod and before when we were talking in the green room about not being enough. And that really struck a chord in me. And so we want to have this conversation around that today because when she said it, I looked at her and I'm thinking in my mind, here's this woman who is so accomplished, has her own huge department and practice at Northwestern.
She has an independent practice.
Yes, and nationally known.
Exactly.
And she sometimes has these moments of I'm not enough. And it brought me back to when I got into politics and started early in my career when this first started coming up. And maybe I always had it as even a child, but didn't really know how to recognize it. And it wasn't until my executive coach said something about, I want to say this sentence, I'm not enough. Does that resonate with you? And I was absolutely. And so coming up into politics, I really noticed it because I'm Mexican and my mom is Caucasian, so I'm mixed. And coming into Chicago politics for the first time, I was assigned at the mayor's office for all the Latino members.
Yes.
And because my Spanish wasn't all that great, and because I was mixed and didn't have the same cultural experience they had, because I grew up in a very small town, and the immigrant community that was Mexican in my town were my family members. And it was a very white town. And so my family had to assimilate early into whiteness to be accepted. And so when I came in, at first I felt like I had to choose. Or that I wouldn't be accepted, that I was not Latina enough, or had to prove something. And I spent years allowing people to identify me and not own my own narrative. And had my coach and others not talk to me about those moments and empower me and give me the tools to, okay, that's coming up. Why is that? And how do I overcome it? I don't think I would be the leader that I am today. And so I know you've experienced kind of these moments. And I thought you even said before this pod, I was like, wait, you have them, Connie?
I think most people who are self-aware, and some don't perhaps, but most of us have moments where it's not so much for me as am I enough? It's do I belong here? And growing up for me, I was very introverted. You know, I talk to you about that all the time. And there's a difference between being introverted and being shy. I am not shy.
But we know you're not shy.
Exactly. But I'm introverted. But growing up as a young girl, we were poor. And so the material things, we talk about that on another episode, weren't present in my life. But it was what gets said around us, people's perceptions about who I am because of where I lived, what zip code I lived in. The zip code I grew up in Milwaukee was one of the lowest from a socioeconomic perspective, and all of the expectations that came with that. But as I moved through my life and my career, Anna, and the successes and the things I learned from, because I always say, I don't fail, I learn. And so what did I learn from those things? But still today, I'll have moments, I'll get an invitation to do something or speak somewhere, and I'll say, do I belong here? Now, that's a difference between a moral question of, if certain people were to ask me to participate in something, like that's a hard no because it doesn't align with my values. But, I don't have the number of degrees, or I don't have an undergraduate degree from what I lovingly refer to as a school with a name that glows in the dark. But I'm here. I'm being asked to participate because at this point in my life, I've got a body of work that speaks for itself, that there are people who would vouch for my authenticity, and I don't have to tell you who I am. I'm always amused, I should say, by people who will say, I'm the kind of person who, if you have to tell me who you are in that context of explaining, then I tend to look twice.
My Angela said, tell me, what is it? Show me, don't tell me.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot. And I think as well, you take up the space in that room, even if sometimes you may not feel like it, but your presence does. And I know you've worked a long time and still battling that. And I feel that's kind of also to my childhood as well. You know, I was first in my family to go to college. And I remember stepping into that university and being surrounded by wealth for the first time, joining a sorority and not knowing how I could even pay for that because my parents couldn't pay for any extra. It was all, I was that financial aid kid, I was that work study kid, and I was so nervous to be there. And I didn't even know what UGG boots were or these, you know, Tiffany necklaces that these parents would give them.
And it's all those material things, right? So we're defining all of these things by what people wear.
Yes.
Not what's wearing on them or in them. And
Yes.
too, I was the first person in my family to go to college and graduate college. And, you know, different generations we are, but the same context, whatever was fashionable of the day, trust me, I did not have it. And I didn't even stay on campus. I was a commuter student at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, because, you know, I was helping out with family matters. And so feeling like I was born an adult almost.
Yes. And my mom also struggled with it. I remember her coming to visit at college for mom's weekend, and the parents would want to go to these fancy dinners, and she didn't really want to go. And I remember my parents, oh my gosh, they died. We went one time, and everyone would have split the check, and my parents don't drink, and they had all these appetizers, and I could only manage the panic my parents felt that they might not have the money in their account to cover something like that. So I always felt that in college. But, you know, looking back and reflecting and what I realize now, the friends I made in college did not care whether or not I had fancy boots or the
good
right
for you,
jacket.
because so often it's easy for people to get caught up and choose those friends who are like, oh my gosh, I got to figure out how to get the UGG boots or whatever, the Tiffany necklace, the thing of the day.
And the kids still are struggling with that because you have social media now. And so the comparison is a thief of joy we talk about. And so looking back, I look at my college friends, even my high school friends and my friends now, and I'm saying this to our audience member who, if you feel that way now, the real friends, not your deal friends, but your real friends love you and care for what's inside.
Exactly.
And all of that. But when I was younger, I did worry about that. And looking back, I wish I could tell my younger self that this stuff didn't matter and to keep your head held high and keep moving forward with your confidence. But I know it's so challenging when you're a young person.
And how does that inform today how you lead? Because I know for me, we talked to another guest, Jen Guzman, and we talked about as leaders, how does some of the trauma that we experienced inform our leadership? And for me, it is compassion and empathy. Compassion and empathy. People would talk to me and say, my goodness, how can you be so composed in light of what you've heard, or that you're reaching out to that person? And because A, I'm not going to judge that individual, and B, I can understand how stuff happens.
Yes. Well, I see it in my team. I am intentional about hiring diverse talent. And I have a lot of women of color that are my senior leadership. In fact, I had a moment with someone on my team just this week. And she had told me that my chief of staff, who we lead with compassion, and sometimes it's hard when you're really exhausted to dig deep and hold space for someone. But my chief of staff asked this person, you know, what's happening? I can tell something's going on. Your work's kind of not there. When you started with us and where you are now, it's not the same person. What's happening? And she broke down in tears and broke down in tears in my office. And she said, no one has ever asked me that my whole career or even when I was younger. They would just yell at me for my failed mistakes and point out my failures, but not ask how I was doing.
And how we talk to people, and children especially, in terms of, you are that mistake.
Yes.
You are that error. And children grow up, and it breaks my heart when I hear young kids say, well, I was a mistake.
Yes.
You are not a mistake.
And that failure does not define you. Actually, failure is a way to growth. And it only helps you become better as a human and in your work product.
As long as you learn from it.
As long as you learn from it, yes.
And you forgive yourself first, because someone might always be willing to remind you of the thing you did wrong.
Yes.
In fact, I can almost say someone will certainly be out there who, if it's a big enough mistake, wanting to remind you of that. But you are not the worst thing you've ever done.
Yes, and you're not your past
and
or your past mistakes.
Exactly. We must learn from those, and that's why it's important to have leaders who are willing to say, you know, I've observed that this has changed a little bit. How are you doing?
Yes.
Is something going on? And doing it in a way that's not, that you're not interrogating them.
No, but just
it's
holding space and knowing,
empathetic.
as a leader, showing your vulnerability as well, and knowing. And I like to share stories of my failures and times that I could have done it better or learned from something, a misdirection. And so if I can share those stories with my team members or even my mentees, then they then know that it's okay, safe space to do the same, that we're human beings.
And you're right. And it's where I continue to this day to learn to ask those more beautiful questions, because I'm also aware that if and some of us have people in our lives who are like that, where they kind of hijack the narrative. So you're trying to explain to me a difficult time in your life or something that has happened. You go, oh, yeah, Anna, I remember, or I totally take it back to make it about me.
Yes.
Right? It's the enough about me, what about me person.
Or I've had it worse.
Oh, exactly.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. I've had it
You
worse.
might
It's
have.
not one-upping.
It's not one-upping, right? It's like we're not trying to win the misery index here.
Yes.
It is and so being aware of that as we communicate as leaders, it is appropriate at times to say, you know what, Anna, I can so empathize with you on that, because when I was starting out in my career, this was something that I did and I learned X, Y, Z. But holding space to say what you're feeling is valid, because what's real is what you feel.
Hi, I'm Darius Hillman. Joining me on the next In the Arena, civic leader, board member, and philanthropist, John Roback.
The first 8 to 10 years, I always tell people, are the most important years, because it allows you to become the expert in your academic field of study or whatever it is that you're choosing to do.
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 and streaming on cantv.org and the CAN TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
I'm listening to this Audible right now of Arthur Brooks and Oprah Winfrey on The Life You Want. And one of the things he talks about is also the world and leaders needing more compassion versus empathy, because compassion is also action oriented.
Exactly.
And so I can empathize with you all day long, but if I don't also help give you the tools to get out of this, because the next step is, okay, I'm holding space for you. And if you want it, if you want feedback or some tools to help you or techniques to help you along the way, because I was there too.
Yes.
If you want it. And if folks want it, 99% of the time they want it, I want to share that. And so I think also in this world, not just empathy, we need compassion, because we need action too, to help people get out of where they're
you said
at.
that. You're right, because
Well, that's Arthur Brooks, so I just want to make sure.
Well, that Arthur Brooks said that, and it's worth saying again, because we can become so engaged in holding space and hearing people that all you're doing all day long is prolonging the sadness or the misery in that context, without saying, as a leader, and I'm talking about in the context of leadership, not for family or whatever, but some of it still applies, to say, okay, here's the compassionate part of me that's going to come out. Anna, what are 1 or 2 things we can do right now to help you feel better?
Yes.
Is there anything? How may I help? Right? And you get to tell me. I'm not trying to prescribe anything.
Yes, because, nothing's worse when you're venting, like, oh, my husband wants to jump in and problem solve. And I'm like, okay,
It's a man thing.
I'm not at the problem solving right now. I just need to vent. And sometimes people just need space for someone, safe, psychological safety, to just vent and unload what's happening.
And I
they
had
don't
to
want
learn that
feedback.
myself, because I am a natural problem solver.
Same.
Right? So you bring me an issue, unless I'm having a bad day, and I'll say, you got issues, I got tissues, but that's usually not how I roll in the world. But it is true. And for us, because we're not in the situation, it's easy to have that clarity. But it's what you and I would do. It's not what that individual who's going through it would do. And I'm also wanting to be very sensitive to how they might respond to what we say.
Yes.
Because in a moment, if I'm feeling like I'm not enough, and you come along successful and say, well, Connie, if I were you, I would do X, Y, Z. You've just told me that I'm not enough and I can't make a decision.
You have validated I'm not enough.
Exactly.
So what kind of tools helped you along the way develop this?
Well, I'm going to go back to the questions and how, the first one is, why am I feeling like I'm not enough or that I don't belong?
Why is that popping up for you?
Right.
Yes.
Why is that popping up? And the amygdala hijack is, as a little girl, I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in because in the circumstances in which I grew up in, many times, I was the smartest kid in the classroom. I would raise my hand and have an answer. Or I was reading on a grade level that was 2 grade levels above me, so I did not fit in. And so I had wonderful teachers who would say, well, you can go to the library, which, just fed my introverted spirit. Let me just go and be with my friends who are in the books that I love to read and develop a vocabulary that allowed me to articulate pictures and tell stories, because that way I knew that was my power. That was my strength. That was my gift, to be able to use the words that I could. So one, when I find myself today in those situations, it's, why am I feeling that way? Are there people in the room that remind me of what might have happened?
Or is it the world telling you that we often do, and social media and places, and
So much
comparison theory
much
of
so.
others? What do they
Exactly.
have that I don't have? What am I not doing enough of to be at
Exactly.
that level?
It's so true.
Because
And-
it's in your phone every day.
And you and I talk about this. This is an intergenerational podcast. And at this season of my life, in a season of rewiring, it is so easy to come to this point. And people, I don't know, it didn't dawn on me, because that's why I don't use the word retirement. Others can. It's fine for you if you do. But mine is rewirement. And it is this notion that somehow you disappear, or all you want to do is nothing. Now, I love just being. That it's amazing. But I know that I have so much more to offer the world.
Yes.
Right?
Well, I'll share this with you, and I'm going to get real here, because this was a thing that happened this week. So I'm going to go there to this vulnerability place. Monday they released a 40 under 40 for cranes, and I had applied, and time's a ticking. I'll be 39 in January.
We'll work on it.
And so that is, Monday I didn't get it. I find out, and then I was kind of crushed of thinking, I didn't have enough of something. What was I missing? Why wasn't I on here? Does anyone see my work? And then I had to pause, because the old Anna would have spiraled for a while, and I would call all my friends and my people and tell them, like, I cannot believe they don't have me on here, and then they have so-and-so. That was last year's Anna. Yes. This year, after a lot of work and knowing my purpose and why and digging in, I had to sit with that uncomfortableness and then ask, why am I feeling this way? Yes. And then I self-reflected on all the things in my life that bring me joy and the beauty that surrounds me, and God's calling in my life, and let it go. That it's okay, that this little ego thing,
and that's
that I am enough.
Exactly.
And that I am doing enough.
And that's a tool right there, because one of the other things is I step back and say, look at what I have accomplished.
Self-reflection, yes.
The self-reflection. And this isn't some ego trip.
No.
This is the place from which I came. And, my oldest sister, Gwen, used to always say, it's not what you've come up to, it's what you came up from. Now, that isn't perfect grammar, because it's ending a sentence with a preposition, but you get
Connie
the
to call
point.
that out. Make sure she knows.
Because
she's
I'm
educated.
I'm a grammarian by trade, by nature. But the whole notion of having come through all of that, and you are here, take a moment.
And celebrate it.
And
celebrate the wins. I tell my team that too. And so instead of letting something define you or what your success is, define your own success. And now my success is completely defined. It's not tied to my work.
And it may change again 10 years from now as you mature. You'll look at Rihanna grow up.
Yes. And my worth is tied to who I am and just being. And that's been a hard thing to separate.
For sure.
For me.
But you're right. It's the whole notion of how I define success.
Yes.
And the coming up from to the coming to. Wow. I survived and thrived in a lot of situations, not by myself. I am not self-made. There were amazing and still are amazing people in my life. I mean, you're one of the people in my life who help affirm me.
And we bring each other joy.
And we bring each other joy.
And that light. And I think when you see the world or other people in the room trying to dim your light, or trying to tell you that you're not enough, it's the people and the friendships like you and I and a few others that we know that have that other bright light that we have to go to and remind each other of, you are enough. You are enough as a friend and as a mother and as a sister and as a leader and anything else. Because when that starts showing up in my life, you know what I do? I put more things on my calendar. Because I'm like, all of a sudden I'm going to be making the most extravagant cupcakes for Rihanna's Halloween. I don't need to do that to prove to my 3-year-old that I'm love her and that I'm enough as her mom, right?
Well, and you're right. And for me, it becomes hyper service. You were asking me the other day, how many boards are you on, and how are you going to redo this because you committed to writing a book, and then I'm like, stop being my accountability partner. But I need that because it is so true. For me, it comes into over-indexing on service because I can see this challenge or issue and I can figure out how to identify it. But the question that becomes, what is that feeding in me? Why am I saying yes when a no is more compassion for me
Yes.
because it creates space for me to really live into my gifts and take time. One of the joys of rewirement for me, though, I call it going down rabbit holes, because I love doing research and looking up things. And so now I can find an idea or a thought, and my latest deep dive is on AI. Maybe we'll talk about that in another segment, artificial intelligence and how that impacts leadership and what that means. But being able to allow myself to do that because there isn't another meeting on my calendar or something else. So this taking the time to really go deep on an issue or an idea or a thought just for the joy of it.
And just for the creativity of it.
Yeah.
We often don't leave time on our calendars for that. You know, we want to run to the next thing. And I want to go back to celebrating wins because we had a big win on my team this week, just yesterday. And I told my whole team, I pulled them all in there and I said, before you go to the next task, because that's how you all are, task oriented, before you go to the next task, the next thing that you have to do, can you please take a moment to exhale?
Yes.
And celebrate this win that we spent months preparing for instead of running into the next thing. And I have to tell myself.
And to say thank you to the
thank
team.
you. Well, I said thank you because it was our win. And sometimes as a leader, you get the accolades, but my
Yes.
team really got the accolades that day. And I loved seeing it. And I told them to accept that sincere appreciation, to accept those compliments, to receive them. Because I know it can be uncomfortable to receive compliments, but to receive that love that they had and to celebrate that win before moving on to the next thing. Because that's
so
what we
profound and
do.
important. Yeah.
And it still steals our joy.
Because we never get to the top of wanting to be acknowledged. And so, yeah, that was a win, but there's got to be a bigger win.
Yes.
Let's just take a moment.
Let's take a moment before we try to get a bigger win.
Exactly.
Sometimes the small wins are the biggest wins.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes the small wins are the biggest wins.
And for us personally, that there are wins or achievements that other people never see.
And that's okay.
And becoming comfortable with that. No one knows what my challenge might have been today, but I know what it was, and I overcame it, and I'm here, and I can rest and feel good about that.
Yes.
And it's, the question I often ask, and I don't know that I still have a real good answer, is our own identities. How much of our identity is what the world says we are versus who we know ourselves to actually be?
And when do we take time to put that down on paper?
Exactly.
Because I did do my little weekend in the woods, like 24 hours, but I took it. No kid,
I was proud
no
of you for grabbing
husband,
that, for
no
sure.
TV,
Yeah.
anytime. And I sat down and put my purpose board, vision board together for the following year. Because what I find about it is when my life gets chaotic or my why gets shifty or too many people in the world are trying to tell me my identity and what success should look like and who I should be friends with or not, or all these things, I get to that vision board now to remind myself of my priorities, my calling, my passions.
Yeah.
And then I have to ask, okay, what am I putting that on my calendar, and does it align with what I'm trying to achieve for myself and individually? And I don't need to share that with the world, but it's my grounding.
Exactly.
So we need to take some time to say, who am I? Who has, for me, what has God called me to do? And so when that feeling of I'm not enough comes up or I don't belong here,
Right.
you have some grounding to go to remind you.
Exactly. And the reaffirming, you talked earlier about deal friends and real friends.
That was also Albert, so I got to give him credit. But I like it. Read this Audible or listen to the Audible if you have time. It's really been great.
And having people in our lives, not just those who will say great things about us, but people that we trust, where we can be vulnerable and talk about the things that concern us or areas of development. And I would submit that there aren't a ton of those people. I know I don't have a ton because I don't think it works well. I think having that smaller group of friends or girlfriends for me who've known me a long time, and certainly I have three sisters, so I'm blessed to have folks who knew me when, but also outside of my own biological family, girlfriends who've just supported me through so many things and with whom I can be comfortable sharing ideas and things in my life, and they're authentic. And they're willing to tell me, to say, you're over-indexing on that.
Yes.
Or you're showing up this way because you're stressed. Or maybe think differently about how you're approaching that. It doesn't always feel good, but I know that these individuals love me. They're not in
come with
competition.
love. They're not in competition. And they're not being judgmental.
Not at all.
And they don't want anything from you.
Exactly.
That's the thing. I think we have to go deeper in our relationships for these real friends so that it's not transactional.
No.
It makes you feel good. It lifts you up. Bella Gandhi says our elevator people.
Exactly.
And it's okay to have deal friends because you need that. You need
right.
that for business and work and
Those
leadership.
are relationships,
They're
right?
relationships.
So we need relationships to be successful in our careers and in our work and to navigate different things.
Yes.
You want a good relationship with Rayanna's teachers.
Yes.
Right? But they're not
Coming over for dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I know we could have this conversation all day. You know, one of the things as we end, I wanted to ask you because you asked in one of our interviews, what is the best advice that your mom gave you?
My
You
mother was,
you asked us in an interview and it stuck with me through and I was like, oh, I would love to hear that.
My mother
I would have
was-
loved to meet your mom. I've
She
met
was
your mom
amazing.
too.
She was so practical, unassuming person. And the way that her love language was doing things and taking care of her family. And people call it resilient. I don't like that word because her life was difficult. There was never enough of anything but challenges and trouble. And I often would say, I really just want to see her smile. And thank God I was able to see her do that, take her on trips and do those kinds of things. I think the best advice she ever gave was people are not really thinking about you, so you be who you are and the best person you can be. And don't worry about what other people say about you.
I love that.
Yeah.
I was thinking about best advice from my mom. I'm going to go with my dad, actually. My mom, she gives me too much good advice, so I can't remember all of it. Yeah. She always also tells me not to care what other people's opinions are of you because I am a people pleaser at heart, and I always hate to disappoint folks, which I think is why I also overextend myself at times because I don't want to let them down. Yes. So I have to be careful of that. But my dad always told me that the only thing in this world that no one can take from you is your integrity unless you give it to them. And that has stuck with me throughout my career and my leadership. So I ask myself when I'm making decisions, is this true? Is this being honest? Am I being transparent? I'm not cutting corners. I'm taking the long process. And sometimes the fruit of your labor comes way later. Exactly. I mean, yesterday I had a win, but I would say it's taken me 10 years to build those relationships to get that win.
You did the work, though.
I did the work, and Jesus knows it because...
But you said relationships, right?
Yes,
and you
have
went
to have
through some
relationships.
stuff to get there.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So I would say that one from my dad. It always stuck with me.
For my sweet mom, there's so many things she said that, in the book, there's a lot about quotes that she had that stuck with me because she almost spoke in parables at times because she wouldn't sit down and lecture you on things. And a lot of her life, because of the challenges, were about the things you should not do because the goal was for you not to be in trouble, for you not to be noticed for doing something that was out of order or that would make you be perceived as yep, this is what people who live in that area. It was always to be correct and so on. So I learned to suppress a lot about who I was because I never wanted to bring embarrassment or shame to my mom or to my family. And so I was the obedient kid.
Yes.
And so you wouldn't catch me breaking a rule. And, I'm still not a rule breaker. I mean, I'm a person who will definitely challenge that which isn't right.
But a lot of in this world needs to be challenged. Yeah, and that's a whole other pod episode, too.
It totally is.
It has been... I love when we get our chats.
Just to talk.
Yeah. I know, just to talk. What do you want to leave us with Say Less today?
So today we did talk about self-worth and knowing who you are. And the message is you are worthy. You matter. And it is important every day to think about what makes you special and unique and to really consider your why and to find those individuals that really believe in you and know you well and will show you love and compassion. You are enough.
Yes, more than enough. This has been an amazing episode. I've learned so much from you. And again, you filled my cup. So again, audience, thank you for joining the Breakthrough on this episode. And we will be with you soon.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye.